Good afternoon. I'm so sorry. We are running a little bit behind, but Dr. Smith and AYŞE and everybody, thank you for your patience. The next panel is on... Okay. Okay, I would like to invite you to introduce the panel. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sally Nyema. I am a professor at Northwestern, an author and a filmmaker. The next panel is Frame the Future and Redefine Women's Representation in Media. We are excited to have with us Dr. STACY Smith, as well as AYŞE POLAT, I believe is your name? Okay. AYŞE POLAT is a German-Kurdish film director, screenwriter, and producer. And Dr. STACY Smith is Associate Professor of Communications and the founder of the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. So we are excited to have you all come up and join us in a second. I just want to quickly explain what the panel is about. We're going to explain how global content standards, through rating systems, distribution policies, and creative writing and industry norms shape the representation of women, both on screen and off the screen. Since we are behind, we're going to go ahead and invite you all to come up and get started. Unfortunately, ALINA won't join us today, but we're going to have a great conversation either way. I think I'll take a sit.
2:30?
All right, hopefully there's someone who will be keeping the time. Otherwise, okay, we'll just go off the vibes. All right. All right, so my first question, pardon? Maybe. Let's see. I have not been given instructions, but we are going to, hello, hello.
There we go.
All right. So the first question is going to be to both of you all. And it's really framed and focused around the focus of this panel, which is global content standards shape not only what we see, but how we see it. From your perspectives, what are the biggest blind spots or outdated assumptions in today's global standards regarding the representation of women, both on screen and off the screen? Anyone can start.
Okay. Well, I think, first off, thanks for having me. This is great. I think one of the biggest problems is that people don't think it's a problem, right? So we just released a global report. Only 11% of directors are women across 11 countries. These are films that make 1 million or more in box office performance within country. We also know that at film festivals, it's a rare year where women represent more than 30% of narrative feature directors. So people seem to think that things are a lot better, and they're not. And that's because of two reasons. One, there's a high volume of press content, and two, this industry thinks it can fix itself. And I don't know many industries that can self-regulate and actually fix the underlying systemic issues that perpetuate inequality. So until experts are brought in, country-specific experts, to deal with the problems and the impediments in each country, we won't see changes on screen until we see changes behind the camera.
Absolutely. Quick question or follow-up on that. You said 11 countries.
Yes.
Particular to a specific set of regions or?
The top film markets, right? Which is
Very
really important to all but China, because it's almost almost impossible to get valid data on what's happening in China.
Awesome. Thank you.
I think I'm absolutely agree with you. And the problem is mostly it is a symbolic inclusion and not a structural influence. And the point is to make a real change. The key positions, the male key positions, have to change, and this is not easy for them. And therefore, they prefer to make a kind of symbolic inclusion. Like they have a few women directors in the selection to say, I'm doing my best, but at the end, it will not change, and this change is hurtful, because in the moment, people has to lose their jobs. And therefore, we are now living a very crucial backlash. Like 4 or 5 years ago, when on the stage, like a festival, there was only men, people were talking about this. Nowadays, it doesn't exist. It suddenly like this discussion never existed anymore. And I'm seeing it, and the problem is most people are not aware of this. There's this image of man behind the camera, director. As a director and producer, I know it's mostly men. And when I go out to festivals, award ceremonies, at the end I say, I mean, something was wrong. I said, no. I said, I mean, they were mostly men. I mean, this has to change. And this is the problem. The problem is that they wanted to change, but change means loss.
Right.
And therefore, they didn't want to lose. And therefore, it's like it didn't change.
Yeah, you're getting at the issue of the perception of resource scarcity, right? That if we create equality, people will lose things. So I really appreciate that point. My next question is specific to you, AYŞE. So a lot of your work focuses on marginalization, especially with Kurdish minorities, for example. How are you able to sustain that kind of work in this environment?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, you have to be stubborn. I think. The urge to make movies is bigger than the obstacles. And there is such a big need to talk about subjects, about things. And I'm convinced I have to tell something, and my voice has to be heard. And therefore, it's a fight. It's totally difficult. It was difficult, but still, I had also on my way, there were a lot of women. There was a man, but mostly women who have supported me. And this is so important to see in the structure. I mean, to have this support. Without the support, it won't work. And therefore, I want to give it back to it. And I'm in Germany. I'm sitting in a lot of commissions. And before I was part of these commissions, I thought, the explanation was always the quality. And in the moment you're sitting in commissions, it's not about quality. It's like when they're male and they want to represent it's mostly subjective in a way. And this broke culture is there, and they want to see what they think, this kind of representation, or again and again, this image of cliches and stereotypes, is all kind of bias. It's repeated and repeated. And hopefully, and I think it in front and behind, especially behind the camera, the more we have, then something will change, because the mindset has to change.
Absolutely, absolutely. My next question is for you, Stacey. So one awesome aspect you bring into this is your research, right? And you already mentioned some of the surprising findings surrounding that. Can you share any more data you have about the representation of women, but more than that, about if people are trying to create more inclusive policies, any sense of what that should look like?
Well, in the United States, those are being thrown out the window. I mean, Amazon had an inclusion policy. It was taken down and erased because of the Trump administration, right? So there's some real headwinds now because of the anti-DEI efforts in the United States, which then makes it really important for other countries, right, to continue this work. One thing that's really fascinating is that the UK is actually doing really, really well on inclusion. And as we know, Hollywood really isn't Hollywood anymore. They're not shooting in Hollywood, right? It's taking place everywhere else. So there's a real, I think, target of opportunity as this awning retracts and it becomes
I was like, how did it get so much brighter?
Right. There's a real opportunity. The other thing I think that people need to really realize is that it's not really about making money.
Oh.
Because women and people of color, if you look at production, distribution, exhibition, they're paid less as this falls over.
I'm like, can we get some assistance in aisle 3?
We know from research, particularly in the production venue, that women and people of color are paid less, right? We also know from the economic data that when you control for a series of indicators, good stories with women in the lead or people of color in the lead outpace their white male counterparts. So it's not about money, because if it was, those two things that I just said, it's about these ingrained ways of doing work that don't represent the aspect to pause, to think about the best person for the job, set up a structure to hire the best person for the job, and ensure that all talent has the ability to rise, not just talent that looks a particular way. Because in the university context, if they had to hire like we have to hire, Hollywood would look different, right? Because there are checks and balances in place to not have a tilted worldview. So I think there's a lot of room right now for other countries to run and really lead in ways that the United States just can't.
Yeah.
Because of the Trump administration.
Yeah, and just the long legacy of, as you mentioned, being afraid of losing resources, right? Resource scarcity. So that's very, very helpful and insightful. So for both of you all, one thing that we're sort of also trying to understand, not just in this panel, but throughout this day, is how we define and who gets to define what is empowering or exploitative when it comes to media. So we don't always agree on what that definition means. We say more women should be included, and we see that as empowerment perhaps, but can you all define a little bit about what empowerment would actually look like in the media space versus sort of exploitation?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because I don't use the word. The women I meet, they're all empowered. I mean, they all know what they want, they know what they're doing. I'd rather invest the resources and energy into how do we reduce the impediments and the barriers, because their running is fast. We just came from, another university in the UK, and I had the privilege to interview Simone Ashley and Gugu Mbatha-Raw. Those are two women that are running as fast as they can, right? And working as hard as they can. So I don't really think it's about empowerment. It's about putting the spotlight on those people that are oppressing and are not giving all talent equal access and opportunity. They're making it gendered. They're making it racialized. They're not focusing on the LGBTQ plus community. Right. They're not focusing on people with disabilities. So I think the aim needs to be towards how do we reduce these impediments. To me, most of the women I meet that are in the industry or want to be in the industry are working really hard.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Aisha, but it makes me think about the fact that you have taken this sort of non-traditional approach, even engaging independently. How are you empowered to be able to engage with the resources you need to be able to do the work that you do, despite the barriers that were mentioned by Stacey?
I mean, what is very important is also power sharing. And the moment, I got in a position where I have the power to decide that I, because the problem is really to see sometimes that people are not aware, that they want to realize it, but to see, and in the moment I can decide, and there is two scripts, and and I have already a nickname, I'm famous for it, but it's like I have to, because in the moment you have to found these voices, and this is a political gesture, it's also, but it's not. I'm not powering them because they are not good, because they are female. That's also a problem. They say, there's also the problem in Germany. Suddenly, the male director says, I'm male, I don't get jobs. And they're saying this while they're shooting. And I said, the numbers are but different. Still, they're like 20% of female directors. And I think this is very important to be like, to use every chance, every moment, because we, as a woman, can change in the moment of when we really have this kind of sisterhood, solidarity, and this is a big thing. And because it was for me, I lived it. I know that there were commission producers who were female. I mostly work with female producers and so on. And this is something I can give back, but it's not. But I also don't want to put everything on our shoulders. That's also something. It's like we when we all have the solidarity, it's not enough. It means the solidarity must come also from the other side. And as you said, as you said, this female, I can tell you an anecdote. I'm normally doing my arthouse movies, and I wanted to, with arthouse movies you can't pay the rent. I wanted to make TV movies. And then a female commission producer, she said, you can try, and the producer of this crime serial in German TV, it exists 14 years, and the guy said to me, I don't believe that women can do crime stories, crime movies.
And when was this? What year was this?
It was 6 years ago. And he was direct. Most of the men thinking this don't talk, and he was just speak out.
He was bold. He said it.
And I said, it's just a kind of serial. It's just, nothing can get wrong. And then he put it, man. And it's 14 years of the serial. Like they have 6 shows per year. 14 years. I did 2 shows, and this had the best rating, and they were shocked.
Yes, yeah, we can give that a round of applause.
And then the other male directors, he said, you're booked because I'm booked because the rating was good. Right. The audience, they don't mind if it's a female director made it. They watch it. And this is the reason. It means it took such a long time to get there. And suddenly, and I know the producer from the TV changed. Suddenly he also booked female directors. And this is something, this is an anecdote which I think we have to stay. And the moment this female producer wouldn't support me that much, I wouldn't came to this point.
About women supporting women, like what we're trying to do today. But there's also work that suggests that that's not always the case, that once you have women in these important positions, it doesn't necessarily mean that equity is going to follow. Can you speak to that a little bit, Stacey, around what are the challenges in terms of descriptive representation, women empowering other women behind the scenes?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's 2 major headwinds. One comes out of research from Northwestern, that the way we think about leadership, we think about it more masculine than we do feminine. So when women are in a leadership position, if they act too feminine, they're discounted as a leader. If they act too masculine, they're punished for being a bitch. So women walk a really fine line in terms of masculinity and leadership are so tightly held cognitively that when people think leader, they think male. Sure. And our research has found that. Think director, think male is very much a part of the industry. Secondly, though, not everyone who is part of a marginalized community is what's called low in social dominance. If you want to see hiring that's inclusive, typically it's being done by people low in social dominance. People that are high in social dominance defer to the power structure. So independent of who they are, they prefer white men because historically white men have been in power. So if you put a woman or a person of color at the top who's high in social dominance, good luck, you're not going to see inclusion. Right? And so we have to move to a more sophisticated understanding of why exclusion happens. And nobody's doing that. Nobody hires the experts. They all think that they can do it themselves. And there's a real benefit if we're speaking about women directors. If you have more women directors, you also have more girls and women on screen. You have more racial ethnic diversity. You have more people over 40. And you have a more diversified cast and crew. There is a benefit, right, to thinking inclusively. But left to their own devices, right, the baton gets passed to people that will just replicate whatever the C-suite currently is. Now, last point on this is it can be done. Netflix is the most inclusive company in Hollywood in terms of women and people of color. They have no competition. We evaluate them every year. Yeah. We put the data up online. They want people to see their numbers. They're over 50% women and over 40% people of color. It is truly extraordinary, and that's why they're leading. They know who they can connect with the audience. And when people ask about what's going on in the U.S., only 78 million people voted Trump in. but the audience is 338, 339 million people.
Exactly.
Those are the people that vote every day when they turn on a movie and turn on a television show.
Sure.
Netflix knows who their audience is, and they're leading because they know what connects and they know what sells.
Netflix would love what you just said. But I really appreciate the point about the social dominance piece, right? I think that's so important. Can you speak a little bit about, if it's possible, about what Netflix did, or even broadly, what people need to do to get that kind of result?
Yeah, I think, look at the top. The top are three people low in social dominance. It was Scott Stuber, Bella Bajaria, and Ted Sarandos, right? Those three people, you look at them and you might not think, oh, this is going to be a place where inclusive content thrives. What people need to realize is great stories thrive, and great stories come from everyone, not just a slice. And so as Chief Content Officer, Bella Bajaria is greenlighting and saying yes to compelling stories because they know. Think about Lift. It just came out, I think, last year with Kevin Hart and an ensemble cast. 1.9, was it one? No, 128 million views. And if you times that by a typical movie ticket, that's well over $1 billion if it had been released theatrically.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they're doing. And so how people look, it's about the story, and they understand that the story comes from everyone, and they're leading. There's not even a second place anywhere close, and that's exciting. It's really exciting.
You would expect people to see those results and say, how can I replicate that? And then go and try to figure out how to do the same thing. But
Well, and the other companies are in the red, or greed is leading their motivation, not how do we nurture and really support filmmakers from a variety of different perspectives.
it also suggests how deep bias really is, right? That people will lose money to maintain it. Okay, so we have like 3 minutes left. I don't know if I have enough for 2 questions, but I'm gonna try. I wanted to specifically talk about funding. I just think that's really important. Can either of you all, and maybe actually you can lead, talk about how do women access the funding they need to tell these stories and to even be in a position to power other women? I just feel like I could just see people walking away being like, well, we need money.
How they find
Yeah,
funding?
yeah, even yourself, how are you able to access funding to be able to tell the stories that you tell?
Yeah, I mean, in Germany we do have state funds, and you know, you go there with a producer with a project, and it starts with like the script is funded, and then it's getting easier. But mostly it was I was sitting 2 years long in a jury for funding from the state, and then they asked me now, and and what I can see is. It's so unbelievable that male, you have to, normally you apply for 500,000 euro. This is the male, most of them want more, and the women want less. And this is so evident. This is so unbelievable.
Also supported by research.
Yes, and sometimes we didn't support this project because it was like it is so little money, it won't work, and this is the kind of behavior. It is a very subconscious. I don't know. It's very hard, and then the jury, it was there was a change of the parliament, and now it is extended. And then they suddenly asked me if I want to go to script funding, and I said no, because script funding you don't shape the cinema, you don't shape the film landscape, because it's little money. You shape it with the production, because the script is 30,000 and the others is 1 million. And I said, I want to sit there, because this is very important. And this is, they were surprised, but I said, this is very important to put yourself in position where you can change something. And very important, don't take any rejection personal. Don't take it personal. It is really, mostly, it is very subjective. It is an accident. It is something, and just stay, don't give up. Stay and say, I have to say something, and I try and try. And don't be ashamed. Shame is also a big thing, like, oh, didn't like it, it's not good enough, and so on. When I see man behavior in this, how they feel and so on, women don't, be, this confident and try again. If they reject it, try again, try again. One day it will work.
Thank you. So we are basically out of time. However, before we wrap up, you gave us a good sort of ending word, which is about confidence, not giving up, trying, applying for the full max that they offer you. Stacey, is there anything you want to leave us with about what a future that's really inclusive of women looks like, just in a few words?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say something that builds on what you just articulated, because I thought it was just perfect. There are people out there that want to write checks, right? And back in 2015, when we worked with the Women's Filmmaker Initiative at Sundance, they have a specific fund designated for this. People like Jackie Zahner, Ruth Ann Harnish, Regina Scully, Brenda Robinson, Chaz Ebert, they're all looking for these stories to write checks and fund them. So what I often tell my students, as unlikely as they might think it is, in your team not only needs to be writer, producer, director, right, camera person, philanthropist. And they gather at festivals like these. There are women writing checks. Women Movie Millions is one of those organizations. Find those organizations, get to know people, and network to those folks that care about storytelling and want to finance it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Round of applause for Stacey and AYŞE.
Thank you.
I'm Sally. Thank you to the World Women Foundation. Enjoy the rest of the day.